Very good afternoon. Myself, Dr. Ravi Kumar Poluru. Today topic is evaluation of organizations. Okay. So till now we have discussed the various types of the process organizations. Today we are going to discuss about the evaluation of organization. In project organization, so mainly the architecture team, and they need to have different types of the plan, how they're going to plan the project, and they need to capture the work structure. Okay, so that's why in the project plan they need to use the technique called WBS, that is work breakdown structure. So here they need to capture the different types of the plans in project plan, and this each and every module has to be assigned to the each and every team member, like team member 1 to till team member n. So these modules has to be, they need to assign or they need to capture with the help of the work breakdown structure. So here in this, likewise, we need to check that what are the different types of the criteria we need to have here. So in this diagram, so we have the inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. So these are the 4 phases in software project management. We know that inception is nothing but here the work is going to assign, okay, in the initial stage, that is we can call as the inception. In inception, the initial stage, so the software management, they are assigning the staff as 50%. Okay, so it means the management are going to concentrate more on the requirements and the planning. So that's why the staff members are, they're going to assign 50% members. So whereas the software architecture, they're going to assign 20%. So in the initial stage, the management is, they need to take up the risk and they need to discuss with the different types of the experts. So here, that's why the software architecture. So in the initial stage only, they need to assign the what type of the different types of the architecture team. They need to capture the different types of the components. And whereas software development, so they're going to assign the 20%. So in the initial stage only, they need to assign what type of the programming language they need to assign. Okay, and what are the different types of the metrics as well as the high level programming language they need to assign. So that's why the staff members, they are assigned as 20%. And software assessment, so there in the initial stage they don't require much staff, so that's why they assign the 10%. So software assessment is nothing but they need to check that what is the progress of software. Okay, in the initial stage they don't require much detail about the software completion. So that's why they have assigned the 10%. So the next step is elaboration. In the elaboration is nothing but they need to develop the architecture or they need to design the architecture. So here, that's why for the software management, they are assigned the 10% as the staff members. It means they need to scrutinize the each and every team members. And whereas the software architecture, they have assigned the 50% of the staff members. And the software development, they are assigned the 20%. Okay, so they need to in detail about, they has to know about the what are the different types of the programming language they need to implement as well as the tools. And software assessment, so here based upon the architecture, the progress of the software has to be improved. So that's why they require the 20% of the staff members. And the next one is construction. The construction is nothing but we can call as the implementation. So here the software management has the 10% staff members, and whereas the software architecture, they have assigned 10% of the staff members. Whereas for the development means they need to write the coding part and they need to have check the different types of the constraints and implementing the tools. So that's why the software development, so they have assigned the 50%. And whereas the software assessment, they have initialized the 30% of the staff members. Okay. And the next one is the last phase, we can call as the transition. We know that transition is nothing but the deployment. In the deployment stage, so here the software management, they assign the 10% of the staff members, and whereas the software architecture, because the deployment is the final stage, it means the completion of the project. So there the software architecture, only the minimal staff members are required, and software development, because they assign the 35%. Why they require the 35% means, because when the after completion of the development, means the modules has to be deployed in the testing team. The testing team will be inspect where the risk of the bugs will be identified. They identify the bugs, they need to retrieve back to the software development. So that's why for the software development, they have assigned the 35% of the staff members, and whereas the software assessment means they're going to check that what is the risk is happened during the implementation. Okay, and whether the project is completed. So they need to know about the status about the software. So that's why they have sent the 50% of the staff members. Okay, so here, so this is the overall how the it will be shifting from one life cycle phase to the another life cycle, and these 50% of the staff will be assigned, so based upon the different types of the phases. So that's why here each and every phases they need to check that the in the inception team, this is the starting team, we know that they require only the planning and the requirement, and they need to check that the supporting staff from the other teams to plan how effectively it will be executed. Okay, and whereas the elaboration team, they need to check about the architecture focused organization. They need to more concentrate about the different types of the components, and these components should be have the project reside in the software architecture team, and they need to support the software development as well as the software assessment team here, because they need to get the stability of the architecture baseline. Whereas the construction team, we know that construction is nothing but the implementation of the coding part. So for the software development, they have assigned the 50%, and for the software assessment team, so they need to know about the how this status about the software. And the transition is the final product, so where they will be taking the feedback from the customers, because if there is succeed, they'll get the good feedback. If the product is failure, so they'll get the minimal feedback. So the deployment is nothing but the maintenance of the software or product. So once the product or the software is uh, I mean communicated to the market, or it is published to the customer, so they will take the feedback from the customers. Okay, so that's why here the in this evaluation of the organization, the sub teams, the responsibility and work packages, okay, and how the information will be flow from low level to the higher level. So the information is smoothly run from one phase to the another phase in a proper manner. Okay, so that is about the evaluation of the organization, how the information will be transmitted, how much staff members we need to allocate from each and every phase. Okay, so that is very important, because they need to concentrate about the um, software architecture as well as the software implementation part and the software assessment. Okay, the assessment is nothing but the deployment of the software. Okay, now we'll discuss about the process automation. So we know that process automation is nothing but automatically the process or the tools will be run with less intervention of the human. If you are taking the 3 decades, so 3 decades is nothing but the, so we know that 3 decades means 3 into 10. Okay, so that is 30 years back. We know that mainly the organizations are going to concentrate on manual work only. Okay, but whereas the modern, they're going to concentrate on the process automation, means automatically the process has to work. Okay, process automation is very important nowadays, because previously in the manual work, it will be like 70% of the human, okay, or staff members will do, okay, and 30% that depends upon the tools. Whereas in the process automation, for the staff members, only the 30%, and for the tools, they're going to concentrate on the 70%. So nowadays we have the modern and advanced technologies. So based upon this advanced technologies, it will be very effective to implement work very smoothly and complete the job in a very fraction of seconds also. Okay, so that's why the automation is very important nowadays, because they need to monitor only the few number of staff they required to monitor the progress of the work. So here the process automation is nothing but nowadays we have the tools which will work very smooth manner. Okay, so instead of doing the 10 hours work, so within one hour the process automation will done, the task will be completed very smooth manner here. So here the process automation is mainly focused about to improve the predictability of software management. So in olden days, if they want to predict the software management, it will take more time because they require the human resources, the materials, the staff members, training people. So everything they need to depend. So it will take long time. But whereas the process automation is mainly used to improve the predictability of software management, and also the performance will be improved. How means, so here the software line of business, we know that software line of business will be gaining more profit. So how they're going to measure means like product quality and time to market, return on investment, and productivity. So with the help of the automation, the quality of the product will be improved, and within the time limit they are going to release the product or the software to the market, and they're gaining more profit here, return on investment, and the productivity. So there the information of the products will be available. Okay. And here the next one is they require the significant level of process automation, because nowadays the modern software development is mainly depends upon the process automation compared to the 3 decades of the information. Organizations are mainly, so previously the organizations are mainly depends upon the manual work, but now automation needs grow depending on the scale of effort. So based upon the organization, the automations will be improved here. And also this in the construction process, so they need to have that best example means if you want to build a dollhouse, single family home, the skyscraper, the software process varies across the spectrum from single person spreadsheet task to large scale multiple organization catastrophic cost of failure applications. So like that they need to have the different types of the constraints, they need to keep that, and they need to do the work in a proper manner. So here the techniques, so before going to use these tools they need to understand what are the techniques and the tools, and having the training is very important when they're going to use the process automation. And time scales means between that, because if I learn the old version of the tools, and now the tools will be varying depends upon the time. So that's why they need to, the time scale is very important. Okay, between that time scale only they need to learn the different types of techniques and the technologies, and the acceptance criteria. So if you are using the process automation, the acceptance criteria is very high here, and the levels of automations, so it will be differ. So based upon the organization and the software what they are using, the automations will be differ. So that's why the levels of automation will be differ based upon that organization what we are going to use the softwares. Okay, nowadays mainly the software organizations are comforted with the task of integrating their own environment. Best example, the IBM, HCL, HP company, like Microsoft. So these are they're using their own environment and infrastructure for developing the software development, because these organizations are maintaining the stability and they're gaining more profit. So that's why they're using their own environment and the infrastructures for developing the software. And also they need to concentrate more about the selection of more or less incompatible tools. So when it will come incompatible means we need to, the developer has to know about the idea whether they need to use these tools in that particular project or not. So they need to have the clear idea. So based upon that idea, and it will be suitable for that particular project. These tools can be used for that particular project or not. And also the different information repositories. So they need to have the good information about the how this repository will be impacted and also or supplied by different vendors. So here we are taking the same software. The software can be deployed by the different types of the companies, different vendors, and different platforms. So sometimes you will get some jargon. So why you will get it? The jargon means suppose if it is works only on the Windows, and if you try it on works in the different types of the platform like Linux or Ubuntu, then sometimes it won't work at all. So that's why we'll get it the jargon here, and the different process assumptions. So mainly, if you want to use the automation tools, you need to have the good idea about the tools and which will be supporting to that particular environment. And integrating such as infrastructure has proven to be much more problematic than expected. So that's why sometimes when they are going to integrate the different types of the infrastructures, sometimes they may be facing the problematic. Okay, as I told that here, the companies they're going to develop their own tools. Okay, based upon the environment and the infrastructure, sometimes they may be getting more problematic. So that's why they need to check that whether these tools can be implemented in that particular project or not, or in the environment. So they need to choose that different types of the constraints and the criteria. And the next one is automating the development process. Okay, so the process has to be done automations, and they need to establish the infrastructure for supporting various project workflows is very important here, because they need to check that how the information, the development process as well as the infrastructure will be supporting throughout the life cycle. So here the mainly when they're choosing the project, they need to select the tool selection is very important here. Okay, tool selection and custom tool smithing and process automation is very necessary, because they require the development plan with acceptable efficiency, because the tools what they are using, they should be compatible with the project. Okay, and they should have the idea how these tools will be very useful, and they need to gain some knowledge to use that particular tools also. And also here the development environment into the maintenance environment is crucial, because while they're writing the coding part, okay, in the during the implementation and in the testing part, so they require this process automation is playing very crucial. Okay, and this has to be long lived software development project. Okay, this they need to have that good idea about how they're going to use this in the implementation part and the maintenance. And also here they need to find that stakeholders, because sometimes the acceptance of the tools will be done by the stakeholders is very rare here. So that's why they need to choose that stakeholders who treat the environment as a first class aircraft necessary, because the sometimes the stakeholders will give the suggestions to use the particular tools. That is the main problematic between the organizations and the stakeholders, because once the organization will be told that they're using these types of tools, okay, the acceptance is very low here. So that's why when we are going to suggest that particular and we need to find out the stakeholders who are putting who are using the first class aircrafts. So they need to have the good communication to accept the information and the tools for that particular product. And also this process automations is a tangible aircraft, because we can have the sense and we can feel that and we need to know what the critical about this when we are going to implement in the life cycle, because sometimes the automation tools are very expensive, okay, because uh, the less intervention of the human and more it depends upon the machines. So they need to have the good knowledge about how they're going to implement this process or the tools, that particular software development. And also here the certain degree of process automation, so they should be have the carry out efficiently, because the developers has to understand how this process automation will be impacted to that particular software development. So we have the three different types here. One is meta process. What is meant by meta process? So meta process is mainly depends on the organization policies, procedures, and practice, okay, for managing a software intensive line of business. So mainly meta processes depends upon the organization policies and the procedures. So they need to have that automation support. So like they need to concentrate about the infrastructure, and the infrastructures what they will be included means they need to have the tools and the different types of the templates and microprocess guidelines, macro process guidelines, project performance, and database of organization skill sets, and library of precedent examples. Means they need to take the different types of the project plans, past previous project plans, and results. So based upon that, the infrastructure has to be improved here. Whereas the macro process, macro means project policies. Okay. Whereas meta process is nothing but organization. Macro process is nothing but it is a project policies, procedures, and practice for producing the complete software product. So within the cost, schedule, and they need to have the quality constraints. Here, the automation support is nothing but here. So based upon the environment. In the environment, they need to take the tools to produce a specific set. Okay. So they require the project plan. So based upon the plan, they need to have the tools which will be incorporated in the project. Whereas the microprocessor, so we know that meta and micro. Meta is nothing but organization. Macro means project policies. Whereas micro is very small. It means it will be impacted to the project team policies. Okay, so project team policies, procedures, and practices for achieving an anti-craft of the software process. And whereas here, when they're going to use that automation support, so that we can call as a tool, because for the project team they require the tools. So the tools will be included such as requirements management, what are the different types of the requirements or the resources they require, and visual modeling means UML, and different types of the compilers, editors, debuggers, change management, metric automation, document automation, test automation, cost estimation, and workflow automation. So these are the different types of the tools they required for the micro process. Okay. Now we'll see the what are the tools. Is mainly this automation is the mainly building blocks for the software development process. What are the tools we are using? If it is the automation, this will be very impacted for developing the software process. And this tools is very important for universally acceptable for the software projects and to frame the process framework. Okay. So here in this diagram, we have the typical automation and the tools component that support the process workflows. Okay, so their workflows will be there, and environment tools and process automation will be there. The first one is management. Okay, the management will be mainly concentrate upon the workflow automation and metrics automations. So they will be checking that how the information will be formulated from the management to the project management to the team leaders, and team leaders to the software developers. And whereas the environment, change management and document automation. So in the environment, that is tools. So sometimes that depends upon the criticality of about the project. So the change management will be happen, and they require the document automation. So the documentation is very important. So this will be done by the automated documentation. And next one is requirement. So various types of the requirements. And design model means components or architecture. So visual modeling and implementation. So in the implementation, we have seen that they require the editor, compiler, and the debugger. And assessment means status about the software, test automation and defect tracking, and deployment. So that is we can call as the maintenance. So defect tracking, if any, for example, we know that the Tesla in 1980s they recalled the Tesla vehicles, nearly 1,10,000 vehicles they recalled due to the hardware failure. And recently in 2023 they have recalled the Tesla vehicles due to the mirror, means side mirror, it will be some problematic will be happen. The recall back means the defect tracking. So they have tracked some defect in that particular vehicles and they recall these vehicles. So when they recall these vehicles or the product, the cost will be very high here because the maintenance, everything has to be paid by the organization. And process, what are the process? So it will be stick on the policies, that is organization policies. And what are the life cycles? So based upon that, we have the four types of the phases, that is inception, elaboration, construction, and the transition. So management. So we have seen that management will be concentrating on the project planning and the control activities about the management workflows, and they need to have the software cost estimation, and they need to use the WBS tools also, because the WBS is very important because these modules or the software project has to be divided like a modules. And managing against the plan, workflow management tools, and software project control plan has to be maintained through online versions. It will be very advantageous because everything will be placed on the online. So the stakeholders of the customers will be checking the information through the online version only. And whereas the environment, so environment means we can have the change management and the configuration and different types of the versions they are going to release. So when they're going to implement it, they require the modern iterative development process. Okay, so initially they're going to publish one software. So they're going to release the different types of the updates of the software. So the versions control will be happen here. And requirement. So requirements will be having the different types of the requirements when we are using the conventional approaches and in the modern iterative process also. And this will be subsystem requirements, and subsystem requirements into the component requirements, and component requirements into the unit requirements will be, they are going to allocate it. And also they need to treat all the requirements in a engineering hours only, because they should not waste the time on the paperwork. So everything should be automated. So what are they're going to take that risk? The risk has to be minimized with the help of the automations. And in the modern process, the system requirements are captured. How they're going to capture? So based upon the vision statement, and the low level of requirements has to be defined by the process. So this will be iterations, and they are going to check that low level components based upon the evaluation criteria. So sometimes the criteria will be considered captured will be with the help of the use cases and the textual represented objectives. And vision statement can be captured by the contract between the development group as well as the buyer. And they need to check the information, how the information will be slowly moves from one life cycle to the another life cycle. Okay, this has to be understood by the buyer. And evaluation criteria has to be, means evaluation criteria, there is a sheet will be there. They need to check that release specification artifacts, and they have the transient snapshots also should be there. And what are the objectives of the iterations, they need to keep on note here. And evaluation criteria means based upon the vision statement, and also they need to check that sources and make out by analysis, risk management concerns, architectural considerations, implementation constraints, and quality threshold. So they need to keep the how much quality they need to design. So because more quality, so more buyers will be there, and more purchase of the customers will be there. And event shows in the dark means what are the critical issues will be there. In the iterative models, so they need to allow the customers and the developers to work with the tangible means they need to cope up with the what are the different types of the versions they need to implement for the system, and also the requirements. So what are the different types of the requirements they need to how the look. So this will be very important, okay, and how they should be set for the application increments. And here the customers and the developers have a common and objective understanding of the priorities like cost, schedule, performance, and they need to have with the requirements. So here mainly they need to focus on the consistency, completeness, and traceability of immature requirement specifications. The project needs to be mainly focused on the proper specification because they need to achieve the project vision. And also they need to have the different types of the requirement managements. So one is recommended requirements approach. Okay, so what are the recommended requirements approach means? So based upon the textual and model based representations, and they need to follow the integrated document automations and visual modeling for capturing textual specifications and use the different types of the use case models. And they need to manage and track the changes in different types of the formats, whether it can be a online or it can be a paper. And traceability between the requirements and other artifacts. So they should be have the automated process for the traceability of the requirements. Okay, so here the extent of traceability among the sets. So mainly it will be long-standing debate. So they need to have the well-defined traceability. They need to check the different types of the test artifacts and have the assessment team. Assessment team is very important because they need to demonstrate the product level of compliance and also the traceability relationship between the requirement set artifacts and technical artifacts. And they need to have the problem space description. So what are the different types of the problems will be rise here, like requirement sets, solution space description, and technical artifact sets. There should be traceability. So and also sometimes it will be very difficult to represent. So that's why the component based architecture that have a large percentage of commercial components. So we have the custom and commercial components. So that's why mainly they need to concentrate on the commercial components. So when they're going to implement the commercial components, it will be very easy to design the architecture. And process demands. So when the process will be demands, so based upon the tight traceability between the requirements and the design. So they need to have the design integrity. And also the tools has to be automated with the help of the process. Okay. The next one is design. So we know that design is mainly used for the architecture part. So they need to check that requirements, design, implementation, and assessment workflows. Okay, and they should be have a better requirements and the design and implementation part. So mainly they need to concentrate on the design workflow in visual modeling, and they need to capture the design models. So where this information has to be represented in the human readable formats and translating them into a source code. The information will be translated into the source code. So architecture first and demonstration based processes enabled. So while designing the architecture, so first they need to design the architecture, then they need to give the demonstration based. So demonstration is very important because what are the components, different types of the architecture components they need to use. So what is the lower level and middle level and the high level they are going to place the different types of the components here. Whereas the implementation, so in the implementation they are going to mainly concentrate on the different types of the programming environment such as editor, compiler, debugger, linker, and runtime. So this has to be used with the change management tools and visual modeling tools and test automation tools because they need to support the productivity in a iteration manner. And assessment and deployment. So what is meant by assessment and deployment? So they need to check that workflow requires all the tools, and they need to have the increase in the change freedom, testing and document protections for the automations, and defect tracking. So defect tracking also one of the most important tool here. Okay, and this will be change management instrumentation, and also have the control release baselines. So in the project environment, we have the three discrete states will be there. One is prototyping environment, development environment, and maintenance environment. The first one is prototyping environment. So prototype is nothing but the architecture. So where they're going to use the test bed. It means the test bed is mainly used for prototyping project architectures. So during this, the phase they're going to use as inception and elaboration phase here, because they require the configuration of the tools, different types of the configuration tools. One is they need to have the look on the performance and what are the technical risk will be happen. So they should have a clear idea about the technical risk analysis and make or buy trade-offs and feasibility studies for commercial products, and fault tolerance or dynamic reconfiguration trade-offs, and analysis of the risk. So they need to analyze the what is the main risk will be happen during the full scale implementation. Okay, and also how the different types of the test scenarios, tools, and instrumentation suitable for the analyzing the requirements. Whereas the second one, development environment. In the development environment, they need to have the full suite of development tools, how the workflow will be happen, and whether they need to use the forward or reverse engineering, or they can use the round trip engineering. And the last one is maintenance environment. So maintenance environment means we can call it as the deployment. They need to check that what is the mature version of the development environment. So first, if the software is released, they need to have the matured. They need to compare between the previous as the present versions of the software. So that's why maintenance environment may be subset of the development environment developed as the one of the project end products, because they need to check that previous version of the environment. So if the present version is better than the previous, then we can release the matured version of the product to the end market. Okay. So these are the references. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.